All right, greetings to you once again. As you know, we have been presenting this series for you based on the Galactic Heritage cards. However, this series is not just about the cards, but is instead a deep look into the energy flows of your galactic history. And the previous cards we have presented explored some non-physical and physical civilizations. We left off the last series on the second era Vega. Before we continue with the journey through the physical galactic family, we're going to move now to the next cards that have more of an archetypal connection to humanity, as you will see. Perhaps some of you have picked some of these cards and wondered how to interpret the energy of that civilization. But once again, we remind you, going back to the beginning of this series, that we've presented this journey as a journey of the hologram of consciousness that you are, meaning that in essence you are one consciousness, experiencing the illusion of separation, much like a fractal, as you journey into these seemingly separate existences. And even while you are having a separate existence that seems quite separate, as we've said, from the source and from everyone else, you never lose the connection with the hologram that you are. So therefore, in essence, even though it may seem like there are billions of beings, there really is but one mind, one consciousness, experiencing reality through billions of eyes. So this brings us then to the first card that we want to talk about today, or the first theme. It is represented by card number 27. The species is non-humanoid, and the theme is alienness. Now, the species, being non-humanoid, obviously is covering a lot of different kinds of incarnational experiences. Some of these experiences are also not incarnational based. So basically, this is a wild card, so to speak, meaning that it covers many different types of consciousnesses. We've spoken to many of you over the last 30 years, and a good number of you have told us that you've felt like you've had experiences where you were not humanoid. Maybe you were in a different kind of expression, perhaps gaseous, the best way to describe it, or a type of a water creature, or something really that you don't have a parallel to on Earth. Now, because we've been exploring really the humanoid history, we do have to say that these cards we're going to explore today, while not in essence humanoid, still fit into the bigger picture. And because you are all part of the hologram, you still do carry the energies of these different kinds of beings. Now, we're not going to go into these different kinds of non-humanoid beings because, well, quite frankly, there are so many of them, it would be impossible. However, suffice it to say, we are simply just expressing this idea as non-humanoid in a general way, and instead we're going to focus on what the theme of the card is. The theme of card number 27 is alienness. One of the other commonly spoken about things that we've heard from many humans is that throughout this human life, many of you feel alien. You feel like you don't quite fit here on Earth. And actually, we would say that while some of that may have to do with your awareness of existences in other realities, it's also more of an archetypal experience that goes all the way back to the source. So if you remember, when we were talking about, in the earlier videos, we were talking about the original fragmentation. And we were talking about how the prime directive, if you will, was, I wonder what it would be like not to know myself. Thus, I will go forth into an experience of unawareness or non-remembering or separation as a way to really experience what it's like not to feel whole, so that I can also then experience the joy of reunification. So if you can imagine then those first experiences from the one of fragmentation, where you find yourself as consciousness in a new environment. Now we can liken this to really when a baby is born. The baby has been in the womb for so very long and is used to floating there and having a very, very different kind of experience. But then it is thrust into a cold, bright world, and it feels alone, and it feels naked, and maybe a little bit confused about the change. So this concept then of alienness, even though it may also be speaking about not fitting in on Earth as a human being, it's also speaking to that original feeling of separation, in which the shock, if you will, of experiencing reality in a separate way could be considered almost like an original wound. And part of how a human being evolves through their lifetimes is how they can learn to make peace with that idea, how they can actually embrace their alienness, their feelings of separation, their feelings of isolation, as a way to move them toward the eventual reintegration. So if you've gotten this card in a reading, number 27, of course, as we always say, you have to look at the other surrounding cards as well, but it's asking you to really look at two things. One is the feelings of alienness or isolation you may have from time to time in your life, and whether or not you are using it as an excuse to not fit in, or whether you are kind of attached to the pain of that. And we're asking you to kind of look at it as a way of remembering actually that everyone else has the same feeling, whether they are aware of it or not. All right, so part of this evolution that you are experiencing, that we've talked about in other of these series, has to do with really fully embracing the you that you find yourself as in any given moment. And that means if you are a human here on the earth with obviously many, many star connections, then reality is asking you to also embrace that experience and, in a sense, move through the pain of that experience of separation and isolation, and allow it to take you to a very different place. The ego will have a hard time imagining what that place is, but if you simply allow yourself to take the journey, you will be able to have that experience. And it is a whole new, amazingly joyous experience if you allow yourself to go down that road. So that's really one of the most important interpretations that we would ask you to think of if you are, not only if you've gotten the card in the reading, but also simply in life. If you are feeling that sense of alienness, please consider it an opportunity rather than a curse, in the sense that if you feel the pain of that isolation and you let yourself stay in it as a way to not join physical reality, then really the pain will only get more embedded, let's say. Now the second one we were talking about is simply more at face value. If you have indeed picked the card, it might be pointing to specific lifetimes that you've had, in which you've had experiences that were very different from a humanoid type experience. And the energy's coming up for a reason. Perhaps you had a skill or an awareness in that type of lifetime that is being asked of you now to tap into. So look at that as well. We always suggest, going back to the first thing we said, that one never shy away from those painful feelings of isolation, because they are usually the window through which immense transformation can occur. All right, so that's number 27, alienness. Now we're going to go to everyone's favorite card. We're joking, of course. It's number 28. The species is reptilian, and the theme is primal fear. All right, so we know that we have not spoken a lot about reptilian beings, and a lot of it has been very deliberate, because there is a sea of information out there that many of you we know have encountered, and most of it is negative, most of it is fearful, most of it puts you on the dramatic bandwagon, so to speak, and we would say most of it is distorted. So obviously we are going to say there are indeed reptilian beings, and in fact some of the oldest beings that you would call physical are reptilian in nature. Mammal being or primate type bodies came a little bit later. So you do have this very long history of experience with reptilian beings that, at least right now, has not fully been remembered. And there's a very specific reason for this. And it has to do with the transformation that you are going through now. So in previous videos, we've talked about how when consciousness comes into a physical reality, it begins to distort. And as you go further and further and further into polarity, the distortions get more and more profound, until literally it is as if you are in one of those mirror houses that you have in amusement parks, where you're looking around and you see all these distorted perceptions, but you don't realize they are all your own reflection. The reptilian energy is very, very similar to this. So in that sense, to be quite blunt, we do not subscribe to this idea of these negative reptilians trying to take over your world and all of that. This is a distortion of the true energy that's happening with this reptilian ancient history. And again, as we've said, there is a reason for it. Now, with the reptilian, well, let's go back to the idea of the hologram again. As we said, you are all literally one consciousness, experiencing separation in a fractal way that sometimes fools you into thinking that there are separate beings out there. So in truth, you can't really have that understanding of the universe and at the same time hold to the truth that there are negative beings or negative reptiles out there trying to control you. The two ideas are not compatible. As you begin to allow yourself to, in a sense, resonate with the frequency of the whole, the holographic you start to allow the distortions in perception to begin to fall away, and you begin to see this idea that everything is really just a reflection of you. And we're not just talking philosophically. We are speaking about this quite literally. This is the nature of reality. There is no escaping this. So, that being said, this is why the theme of the reptilian card is the theme of primal fear. Because in order to fully embrace the truth of your own holographic nature, You have to allow yourself to walk through the distortions of perception and embrace the thing that you fear, knowing that it is really an aspect of you. So this is one of the reasons for all of this negative propaganda and distorted information about reptilian beings. It is literally for the purpose of helping you process the most primal of fears, both on an individual level and on a collective level as well. Only when you can allow yourself to successfully pass through the doorway of the primal fear will you then be able to allow yourselves as a species to move to the next level of your evolution. So in that sense then, the reptilian energy is performing an extremely valuable function to help you process this fear energy so that you can move more into your integrative consciousness. Okay, that being said, does this mean then there are no reptilian beings contacting you? There are many reptilian beings contacting you. Actually, there are so many different species and subspecies of reptilian beings. Primarily, most of them are extremely peaceful, and a lot of them are what you might say introverts, meaning that they don't actively pursue contact, though there are some that do. And going back to this issue of fear again, you're going to find that, being that we talk about characteristics of different species, the reptilian species as a whole generally have a very interesting characteristic. And that is kind of like the idea of being soft and squishy on the inside and hard on the outside when it's necessary. Meaning that anyone who has had an encounter with a reptilian being that is not distorted usually find an immense level of love and compassion coming from these beings. And that is really a window into the true nature of their consciousness. But one of their characteristics is, as soon as they feel rejection or fear coming from human, they, in a sense, put up the shields. So that can account for why some people might maybe feel a hardness with some of the reptilian beings from time to time, because really that hardness is a reflection of perhaps the fear or trepidation or resistance that the human might have. So as you have communication or contact with reptilian beings then, you're going to find that they are a wonderful barometer for you to look at your own fears, if you are willing to do so. If instead you wish to continue, for whatever reason, projecting this negative image onto them, then you will find that there won't be really any movement or resolution in your relationship to them. So as always, it's a doorway into your own fear and a way to work with yourself on extremely deep levels to help facilitate a shift in consciousness within yourself and also on the collective planetary level. Therefore, if you have gotten this card in a reading, you can interpret it pretty much as what we've said. Either it's a reptilian energy contacting you, and you might already know that consciously, and or it could be exactly what we've describing, that you are in the process, or you need to be in the process, of really kind of delving into your own primal fears and looking at how the fearful things in your life are doorways for you to process and shift some very deep things within you. So the Primal Fear card then is a gift if you choose to use it that way. And a little joke, we feel a little bit unfortunate for the reptilian beings who kind of have to be the punching bags, let's say, for some of this very, very deep primal fear. However, those that are contacting you do so willingly. They are aware of this, and they are attempting to work with you in whatever way they can to help you move through that doorway. All right, there's a lot more we could say about the reptilians, but it would be more of a tangent. So for now, we feel that's enough for the purposes of these videos. Okay, the next card we have here then is card number 29. The species is insectoid, and the theme is hive mind. So much like the non-humanoid card, this card kind of encompasses a range of different being types. Basically the type you would call insectoid, and the insectoid beings range from physical like you into less physical, more plasmic beings as well, which is representing a spectrum of the evolution of consciousness. We know many of you have had encounters with insectoid beings, and very often even we've referred to some of the insectoid beings as founders because they sometimes appear as praying mantis being, something like that. But there are all different types. So we're not going to go into the different types, but the most important aspect of this card is the theme, which is hive mind. What does this mean and how are we using it? Well, if we go back to this idea of the holographic consciousness that you are as the one, then you can see that that idea of holographic consciousness can be in some ways likened to the idea of hive mind, meaning that all pieces are connected even though they might seemingly be operating through different bodies or through different trajectories or through different purposes. But there is but one mind that is, let's say, the umbrella containing it all. Right now, you are experiencing life as a human, and you've not, as humans, really tapped into, at least in third density, you have not really tapped into this idea of how you do exist on a collective level as well as on the individual level. However, that is starting to become more apparent to many of you as you are starting to see that time and distance really does not have a hindrance for you in connecting with other people on your planet. You're starting to see energy flows. You're starting to feel what the mass consciousness itself is experiencing. Such as right now, this video is being shot in the month of October 2016. Right now on your world, there is a tremendous amount of polarity that is happening where people are, let's say, taking sides against this, for that, etc. And all of you are feeling the pressure of that intense separation, of that intense polarity. Even though you might choose not to watch the news or read the newspaper, you're still feeling it inside. This is because you are part of the hologram. This is because there is an aspect of humanity that is indeed a collective mind. You cannot escape that idea. All right, so if you have gotten this card, then how can you interpret it? Well, as we always say, again, it depends on your circumstances and the other cards, but either it's saying that there are lifetimes you've had that are connecting with you now, that are insectoid in nature, or most strongly, it is asking you to become aware of the part of you that exists within the human collective. How can you allow yourself to joyfully exist within a collective that perhaps at this time is experiencing a lot of pain and chaos. Because you're going to find that if you resist this, the pressure, the discomfort will only get more pronounced. So what's being asked then is for you to recognize your connection to the collective, being an equal part of the collective, much like a hologram and the different ways the hologram expresses itself, and try not to shun those parts that you don't resonate with, because ultimately they are still you, much like what we were talking about with the primal fear. This is again one of the reasons why we are presenting these cards together, because they are really speaking to this idea of the holographic consciousness that you are and the necessity of embracing all of the parts instead of projecting fear on some and embracing others. This is, in any civilization's evolutionary process, one of the most important and critical times. All right, finally we go to the next card, and we're skipping numbers a little bit here to keep the theme together. We are moving to card number 34. It's the card representing your sun or your solar system. And the theme is solar consciousness. Now, obviously in the card deck and in galactic history, we've talked a lot about different other star systems. We've not really talked so much about the consciousness of your own sun. Because every sun, every star is a conscious being in its own way. And your sun is also a conscious being. You can look at the idea, the model we've given you about the hologram, and then the fragmentation or the fractals moving out from the hologram who are experiencing a seemingly separation. You can look at your sun as being like the hologram and the planetary system, the planets, being like the fragmentation or the fractal that comes out from the sun. So you're going to see archetypal qualities in the planets that are all resonant within the sun. Now, the sun's consciousness is a portal all the way back to galactic core. So anytime you connect with the consciousness of your sun, you have an opportunity also to trace that connection all the way back to galactic core if you wish. Now, we're not going to really put characteristics right now on your sun, though we would say right now it's skewing a little bit toward a masculine expression because of the part of the cycle that it is in, and also because of the physical beings such as you and your evolutionary cycle, which is moving from a masculine into more of a male-female balance cycle. Your sun is going through the similar type of integration because you and the sun and your evolution are all intricately tied together. But the main thing we want to talk about regarding this card is also what it represents to the human consciousness. The sun card represents the higher self. So again, if we use the model of the hologram, you can see your higher self as being the hologram that you are. And all the different lifetimes are fractals that come from that hologram, but the higher self is the organizing principle. It's the same idea. So, if you've gotten this sun card, number 34, in your reading, then usually we find people get very excited about it because it's saying that your higher self is there and ready to communicate with you, or already is communicating with you. And all you need to do is make the choice to consciously connect with it. Of course, remembering everything that we've said about how you are the hologram. So nothing exists outside of you. Thus, going back to this idea of connecting with the higher self or channeling the higher self, it's important to remember that if any information comes through seemingly from the higher self that appears to have polarity to it, you might want to question yourself about where within you are still a little bit fragmented that is creating that distortion. So the higher self in that way is a wonderful mirror in which to see yourself. And it is obviously one of the first and most easiest energies to connect with if you are a new channel or you are opening to a new spiritual life for yourself. Therefore, the solar consciousness card is obviously a very important one for humanity at this time, because in order to make the leap to the next stage of your evolution, you will definitely need to make that connection with the part of you, the higher self, if you will, that is less fragmented, less polarized. That energy is there for you now. It's there for everyone. It simply requires tuning in and being willing to see yourself naked, stepping forward, making the connection. All right, so we've been downloading quite a lot of information to you. When you watch these videos, we're also downloading a lot that isn't said verbally as well. So it might take some time to digest what we've said, but we have just presented for you some of these archetypal cards that are very, very important, not only within the deck, but important for the human consciousness to work with. In the next series now, we're going to pick up the story. If you remember, the last video was the Vega Second Era. We're now going to pick up the story in the next series that has to do with how that Vegan civilization began fragmenting even more into what you now know of as the Zeta civilizations. So that will be the next series. For now, once again, we thank you so much for your attention. We send you much love.